All right. Oh yeah, I'll mute his ass. How do I mute his ass? Manage participants. I'll manage you. There we go. Okay, so welcome to JS classes. I am recording on OBS, right? Yeah. Cool. So welcome to JS classes. Welcome to the rock. By the end of this lesson, I hope that you will be able to encapsulate state and behavior with classes. So you've done all of these things before. You've just done them in Ruby. It's really not too terribly different in JavaScript, with some exceptions. A thing that you need to know right off the bat is that JS classes are fake. There is no such thing as a class in JavaScript. All a class is a function. It was a pattern that people were doing so much that they just added a syntax for it. But it does not have classes the way that Ruby has classes. So I'll show you what that pattern looked like. Yeah.
Does that mean it's not an object-oriented language?
It is an object-capable language, but I would not say that JS is object-oriented in any way. So if I'm making... So I make a JavaScript file. The pattern that people were doing looked like this. You'd make a cat function with a capital C, and you'd take in whatever you wanted to like construct with, and you would do this dot name equals name, and this dot age equals age, and like that's it. What you can do is you can use the new keyword with this and do something like whiskers equals new cat. And under the hood, to this day, that's still what's happening with classes in JavaScript. It's just a function that you can do some kind of goofy shit with.
That's like your instantiating.
Exactly. So if I wrote this exact same thing as a class, it would look like this.
The constructor would be like the equivalent of initializing or something?
One for one, the exact same thing. These two things are equivalent.
Seems harder. Seems like more work.
Yeah, why bother?
Because there are some things that are harder to do in the functional format than they are in this. So let's do a little bit of vocabulary mapping. What are some OOP kinds of terms that you remember from Ruby?
Method.
Method, love it. Keep them coming. Instance, love it. Give me more.
Variables. Class variables.
Okay, awesome. Class variables versus
Instance.
good. Class and instance variables.
Instance methods and class methods?
Yep, and methods. Anything else? Privacy. Remember when we, in APIs, we can specify some methods as private?
Right, yeah. Then there's also like Google it's stuff that happens.
That's Rails magic. That's not OOP. Yep. Relationships.
Adder reader and all that stuff?
Okay, so those are called getters and setters.
So I guess still method good.
Yep. Getters and setters. What else? Any other OOP words about
Self?
self? Love it.
So is
Initialize.
self like this in JavaScript, right?
Indeed. Yes. Any other vocab words? Cool. So we can map these. If this is Ruby, our JavaScript equivalent, same. They're also called methods. What's the difference between a method and a function? No, there is a, like in JavaScript, not really, but this is a semantic difference. It has to do with how we use it. It's a little bit different.
A method could mean like a method you wrote, but also there's an existing method
Yep.
that you can put inside, right?
So there's three like seemingly equivalent words that we want to differentiate between at this point. Procedure, function, and method. They all kind of look the same. There is a difference between them. A method is a procedure. Actually, let's start with procedure then. Procedure is a repeated set of instructions. Here is this code. I want to be able to call that series of steps anytime I want. That's a procedure. A function is a transformation. It takes an input, returns an output. Not everything needs to return something, like procedures that just modify some other variable somewhere else. Procedures. Function, that's a transformation. I take in this input, I generate this output. Functions are a math thing, like f of x, like that kind of thing. That's functions. Methods are procedures on objects. So when I do cat.meow, I've called the cat's meow method. Not its function, that's a different thing. If it's a procedure on an object, it's a method.
Can you see the procedures one more time?
Repeat.
Sorry, that's in Ruby?
This is in like programming theory. A procedure is a repeated set of instructions.
So then in JavaScript, we call everything, not everything, but most things are functions.
Most things are functions, except that's a constructor method. If I have a meow on here, that's a method.
Because this doesn't return anything?
Well, and because it's owned by a class. So if I do something like let count equal 0, I do function increment count equals count plus 1. Increment, in this case, is which?
Method.
Function, method, procedure. Samantha, what did you think it was?
Function, simply because it's underneath the function.
Okay, that's fair. It's not it. The function word in JavaScript gets used for all three of them.
Okay.
Good guess, though.
I think it's a procedure, right?
Okay, why do you think it's a procedure?
Just take something and just make it increment it.
Outside of the function.
That's how.
It's an instruction that now I can just call increment, increment, increment. If I wrote that as a function, it would look like this. Yeah. And if I wrote it as a method, it would be something like this. Because I'm changing the state of some object. Method, function, nope, procedure, function. That's the difference. Academic difference, but as we're growing up, time to start using some words correctly. Awesome. So let's back to class land. All right, so this is just what we call sugar, syntax sugar for this. This is not actually a different idea. It's just a more sugary way to write it. Let's go back to our comparison. We have methods, instance. So an instance in Ruby we do with .new. We call the new method. In JavaScript, it's new and then whatever the class is. It's a separate keyword. We have class instances and class variables and instance variables and class methods and instance methods. We still have instance variables and methods, but we don't say class methods and variables, we say static. And that's way more common. That's what Java calls them, that's what C++ calls them, that's what everything else calls them. Static.
So it's a class method essentially.
Exactly. A static method is a class method. A static variable is a class variable. Same thing. Privacy. In JavaScript, not really. You can achieve the same sort of thing in JavaScript, and there's like proposed keywords for JavaScript that do this, but not very well supported. Actually, let me see if that's changed. Can I use privacy, private class fields? Yeah. I see fields of red. Can't use that shit. Only in Chrome. A little bit of Opera too. And I say to myself, who gives a shit? Like,
You can't use it in Firefox, because isn't that, isn't Mozilla like
depends. So, like Chrome, like Google has more money than Mozilla does, and so a lot of times this is a matter of like, with all of the existing things that we have in our JavaScript engine, how do we also incorporate this? And so sometimes Google is like first to the punch. Also, it's entirely possible that like the spec isn't finalized yet, and so Chrome is doing something that they're gonna have to change later. And so Firefox is saying like, whoa, 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 how about we wait for the spec to finalize before we start doing an implementation? The spec is like from a standards group. I know, I'm not wild about that. The spec is like from a standards group. It's from TC39, which is a technical committee 39. It's a quasi-governmental style agency that's part of the W3C. And that W3C is the equivalent of like the web government, basically. They say what HTML is, they say what JavaScript is. There's a bunch of different members. Some of them are representatives of major companies like Mozilla and Google. There's also like Yehuda Katz is on TC39. Yehuda he was a Rails core team member. He also made Ember. He made Yarn, and he worked on Rust. And so he's just a famous web person. And so it's just a collection of those people. Anybody can propose a new feature for JavaScript. And then that TC39 like kind of promotes that through like an approval process. And so it goes proposal, straw man, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then accepted. And there's different criteria for each of those. And usually like part of something moving up the process, like maybe the dev team, like application developers at Chrome, really want private fields because it would make their life so much easier. Part of moving up through the process is at least one browser vendor needs to ship an implementation of it. And that like takes it from stage 2 to stage 3 or something like that. And so that might be part of this process. And then Mozilla can look at how Chrome did that because the V8 engine is open source, and that might just save them R&D time. Lots of different reasons that can happen. But I'll go back to, not really. Relationships. Same. Since but since JavaScript isn't really an OO language, you end up doing that stuff way less.
So it's still like belongs to, has many and all that stuff.
Yeah, there's no active record. And so the concept of belonging to and having many, that's still the same, but you don't get all those cool keywords from active record. Getters and setters, different. So you had like the adder accessor and adder reader and adder writer. It works different in this. For one, since there's no concept of like data hiding, I can do whiskers.name. Like I don't need to specify that it's readable or writable or anything like that. Yes.
I have a similar title with custom methods. So the reason we do classes and stuff in Ruby is because that's where you manage like data and stuff the back end.
Mhm.
But JavaScript, we don't really do back end, right? Like at least not.
Ooh, or do we? When do we do JavaScript in the back end? Node. That's what it is.
Okay, so this is part of like something you do with Node.
Could be.
Right.
So just because we're not doing database interaction directly doesn't mean we don't have data to manage. So I might say, hey, give me a cat and fetch it. Like it might have a fetch method on here that fetches its data from the back end. So I can encapsulate that behavior. Also, I can still keep track of all of my cats, even though I might not be showing all of them in the DOM right now. And so if I have all of those, maybe I can check cat.alls, like .all static method, instead of having to make a network request every single time. I can see what I have already.
So is this then a way to persist data without a backend? Or do you-
Like usually in conjunction with a backend. Like you're, you might be caching data so that you don't have to make a network request if you don't have to. It also just might make your application logic cleaner. So I go, hey, I want a new Pokemon. I'm going to pass in Pikachu. By the way, can you fetch all of Pikachu's like shit from the Pokemon API? And then once you're done with that, call its add to DOM method. And so now you've like wrapped up a lot of very complex behavior in like pretty simple objects, just like we would in Ruby.
Got it, and then you keep all that information here so that
Yes.
you don't always have to do that.
Correct. And maybe there's a class, a superclass for this called model. And then that extends model, because maybe that fetch behavior is exactly the same on every one of these things. And now, like, I've got an active record style thing that I can use to sort of unify that behavior. And speaking of which, that should probably go on our list also. Inheritance.
So since JavaScript doesn't have like a direct line to a database language like Active Record, what?
An
is it
ORM like
an
Active
ORM,
Record.
sorry, yeah.
Mhm.
So then what do? Do you use Postgres or something for your database, or?
Well, so like on the back end, you mean?
Yeah.
So with Node, there's ORMs. There's just none of them nearly as good as Active Record. But like on the back end, we've got things like objection and sequelize that like very much have has many and belongs to and all that kind of stuff. None of them are as good as Active Record though. Cool. And then self, this with an asterisk.
Why does that always happen?
So self is super straightforward. If it's inside of a method, it's referring to the class. If it's inside of a method, it's referring to like an instance, right? If it's outside of the definition of a method, it's referring to the class. That's it. And that's how it works in almost every language too. JavaScript's this, whoof.
Did you say it's a nightmare?
It is. So JavaScript, this. Okay, here we go. In most cases, the value of this is determined by how a function is called, runtime binding. It can't be set by assignment during execution and may be different each time the function is called. ES 2015 introduced arrow functions that don't provide their own this binding, retains the lexical it's just so much more fucking complicated. So global context, function context with simple calls and binds and arrow methods and like object methods, prototype chain with a getter or setter, it's as a DOM event handler, as an inline event handler. Like it's the worst designed part of JavaScript, hands down. The good news is that you can spend most of your life as a JavaScript developer and not do a whole lot of dissing. Unless you really want to do this class method stuff, in which case we just kind of have to live with some of the complexity. Initialize is just called constructor, which is also what it happens to be called in every other language. And then inheritance in Ruby. How do you do inheritance? With that.
Yeah.
In JavaScript, extends. That's it. That's our big comparison between DribleScript and Ruby. Questions so far? Sure. Yeah, why not? So I'm going to start by just giving you an example of, I'll try to do all the things that we have up there. All right, so I've got a constructor. That's what making a new instance of something looks like. If I want to make just some other method, it's real tempting to think of this as being an object. It's more like function curly braces. So when I do another method like meow, there's no comma after this. You're going to make that mistake a lot working with these. No comma between your different methods. Let's see, what else? So meow might do something like console.log. My name is this.name. Static methods. So maybe I do something like all cats equals array, and then maybe when I make a new instance, I've never actually done this before, so I'll be curious if this works. If I do this, oh no, that's the problem though. You can't access a static method from an instance method, so I can't see that. Interesting. So yes, correct. So yeah, this wouldn't be the same thing. Interesting. So I might have a static method called like so good.
You do like all cats in the outside, and then you just set all cats outside of the constructor. 'Cause then
But you'd want to do it as
that's the
part,
class
like
list.
when you make one.
What you're doing when you make one, push it into all caps.
Yeah.
But you can't do that with this.
Right. Shit. It's fucking language. No, definitely not. Actually, I like JavaScript a lot. I think that this class shit is the worst idea that we've ever done in the language.
Like, Rail, we don't use this very often in the day-to-day.
No, like you'll use it, for example, in Vue a lot, but Vue does magic shit to make this consistent across the Vue app. But for just regular programming, stay away. it's a landmine. All right, I'm still trying to think of a good static method. So I'm gonna call this like what is, and it's going to console log cat is a mammal, baby. And if I make that a static method, I can call it on cat. I can do cat.whatis and get that to happen. I can't do whiskers.whatis because it's only a class, not an instance of the class. Cat. It's Friday somewhere. Cool. So that's a static method. A getter. This is kind of interesting. I could say get details, and I can say and what's fucking cool about this is when you put get in front of it, I can do whiskers dot details like it was a property, even though it's actually a method. And so I can have complex behavior in here. I could have one line after another. And it's going to be whatever it returns or whatever it does just becomes available as details, as a property.
So I know like in Ruby that you could do like Ruby and the file name, and they're like, can you do like node app.js or something, and it'll run the file and return that or something?
So what was that?
So like I know in Ruby.
Yep.
Oh, we could just do that too.
That's probably more accurate. So I have cat dot what is. I could also make that a getter. You can do a static get, and I wouldn't have to invoke it anymore. I don't use these a bunch, but I'm pretty sure you can also do set the same way. And set will take like what you set it equal to, and that would be something like dot details equals something here. Something like that. I don't see those get used ever, honestly. But it would be something kind of like that. No privacy relationships are kind of the same. The difference is that, so there is a difference. And JavaScript is a little bit weird in this regard. Not really. This is more a difference between functional languages and OOP languages. Remember how like in the environment file, we just jam together a bunch of classes and now all the classes can see each other? JavaScript super doesn't work that way. PHP does the same thing. Most OOP languages will like have this thing called the namespace where all of those classes can all see each other. Anything within the same namespace sees each other. JavaScript works off a system called modules. And so if I want to have like an owner class or something, I need to explicitly say where that's going to come from. And usually that's something like import owner from some other file or something. But you actually have to manage where all of those things come from on your own. Yeah.
So technically, you could probably just put your classes all in like one file and then like do the import on the JavaScript to use all this.
Yep. Correct. That'd end up being a mighty big file. All right, that's relationships. Talked about getters and setters. We talked about this. Talked about the constructor. And then, yeah, if I wanted to have class mammal, then what I might do is give that a constructor. I'll say this dot type equals mammal. And then to make that happen, to make this constructor run, anybody, this is actually the same in Ruby. Anybody know what I do? Nope. Super calls this function. Whoever your super class is, super calls its constructor. It's probably because we didn't have to do it ever. That's the case in every OOP language. I have my constructor and I have your constructor, and I get to pick when that happens, but I have to call super sometime. But now cat.type will equal mammal. And that is basically everything that you need to know about classes in 26 lines. Cool. This is a very good question. So I'll show you an example of me using classes in the real world. On the Develop Denver site, I use them on the front end and the back end. So I have a model class that every single model on my front end inherits from. It has a constructor. It makes all these things like building a URL and serializing data. A lot of things that Active Record does. A lot of what it does is it just makes those available on anything that inherits from it. Normalize, fetch all. That's a great example. So I can do cat.fetchAll, and it'll get all the cats. And deserialize, if I remember correctly. Yeah. What it probably does is it makes instances of all of whatever the model is. So I've got all that stuff happening in this model class. And then for any particular model, like an event, this is not like DOM events. This is like a talk, a workshop, or something that somebody's doing for Develop Denver. It inherits everything from model, and it calls its constructor. As soon as I do that, I have event.fetchAll, I have event.deserialize, I have all these things that I defined with model. And I can also have my own stuff. And so if you look at the models I have here, this is like a user profile, an event for the thing, a listing in the schedule, and a talk. Those are just nouns that are part of the domain for our conference. Yeah?
I noticed on some of them you have the async. What does that do?
Async is a different way to do promises. It's an alternative to .then. And some people like it, and I'm not one of them.
Why would you rather use that, or why did you use that instead of like a .then?
It actually tends to go pretty well with OOP stuff. But let's say I wanted to have something asynchronous in here, like fetch cat data. What I can do is I do some async thing in here, but like what that'll look like is instead of like returning the promise, you would return await fetch whatever, and then in some function down here I go initialize my app. I make that an async function also, and I could do something like whiskers, await whiskers dot fetch cat data, or say cat data equals await that, and then do something with cat data without .then. It looks just like regular synchronous code, but it still waits for this to finish. And I can save it as a variable directly without like accidentally saving the promise. Async is something that modifies a function. Await is a way to wait on a promise to finish. So cool, all your stuff looks synchronous. I don't think that's actually an advantage. I think the .then chains actually are a lot more powerful. Yep. Hit me. Yeah. Absolutely. Hell yeah. So, synchronous code. I do something, and I do another thing, and I do another thing, and I do another thing, and I do another thing. Code starts at the top, goes down to the bottom. So most of our statements in any language are like this. That could be an assignment, that could be a loop, but it doesn't start until the thing before it is done, and then the thing after it can't start until it wraps up. That's synchronous code. Not quite. All of this, everything on this is synchronous. When I call new for this constructor, it does this, and then it does this, and it does this. This doesn't execute until this is done. This doesn't execute until this is done. It's all in order. It's how you think of programming.
So that's synchronous?
That's synchronous code.
Okay.
When you just think of a program that does something, you're thinking about synchronous code.
So like Node is asynchronous then?
Node is asynchronous by default, but what we mean by that is something doesn't have to be done before we keep going.
Yeah.
So
like the waiter in the table.
Exactly.
Yesterday.
So
like Ruby Rails like stops and waits and waits and waits, but Node is just like, all right, we'll get back to you, and then comes back around so that all the other things can happen, and then it just comes back to check and like, okay, now everything's good.
exactly. So I fetch here, and then when that fetch comes back, I have some things that depend on that. This is a .then chain. But while it's doing that, the rest of the program keeps going too. Everything after you fire off your fetch, that happens. If there's things that need that fetch to be done, I just .then off of them. Asynchronous code. And the thing that you're talking about with the waiter is there aren't two parts of your computer working on this. What's happening is that it's jumping back and forth between these based on when they wrap up. And all that's just invisible to you. But that's what Node means by being asynchronous, is it handles what has to happen in what order. All we write as application developers is that, like, I know that this can't happen until this is done. And so that part of it is synchronous, but these two things can happen in parallel so that they're asynchronous. I might fire off a fetch request to get all of the talks for Develop Denver and also continue loading the page and doing all these other things because, like, maybe those things aren't dependent. But I can't add the talk DOM elements to the page until that fetch request finishes up. So fetch the talks, and whenever those are done, add them to the page. While that's happening, keep loading the page, attach the event listeners, make sure the pictures show up, all that kind of shit. They can happen at the same time, so they're asynchronous. Cool. So let's get hands-on. Oh shit, this one's on the old site still. I haven't moved it over yet. It's this. Encapsulating state and behavior classes in JavaScript. Create a Pokemon class that stores a Pokemon's name, image URL, and list of abilities. Add a method called createCard that makes this. Fetch a list of Pokemon using the Pokemon API. Create a new instance of the Pokemon class for each one you retrieve, and generate cards for each one, these things, and then add them to the page. Questions about what any of that means? What it's asking you to do. Not, even if you got questions about how to do it, let's start with questions about the instructions.
So you should be, like, adding a method, you should be able to say, like, Pokemon create card and put in all the information that will pop that up.
Like Pikachu.createCard. Yeah, this is method.
And all of these things are inside the class, like the
Yes.
methods.
Right.
That's same in fetch, same in.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, so we're creating all these new instances, but we're not, like, recording them, you know?
Correct. Like you record them outside of this. So there will be parts of your application, the things that are like instantiating the classes and, actually not that. We do need something to tell the classes what to do. Those will be outside of classes. And this is actually the case in OOP languages like Java and Ruby. It looks like I can do things that aren't in classes. Everything in Ruby is happening inside of a class. When you don't declare a class, you're just inside the main class. That's like the default that everything is inside of. There's no similar concept in JavaScript, so we can do things outside of that also. Like, for example, do the, let's see, what would it be? Fetching a list of Pokemon. You could do that as like a Pokemon.all, but then like that Pokemon.all needs to get called somewhere. That's probably going to be outside the class. All right, so I'm going to give you two options. I can leave this up on the screen, and you can pound your way through it. I think you'll probably learn more doing that. Or I can do this, and you can watch the video and try it yourself later. What do you want to do?
Get out now.
Except with
Oh, shit. Yeah, it is. All right, you want to see if I can do this in 4 minutes? All right, fuck it.
So I'm going to follow the video with lots of
Awesome. We'll do it live. All right. All right, so we're going to create a Pokemon class. Class Pokemon that stores name, image, URL, list of abilities. So constructor will be name, image, URL, and abilities. Cool. Needs a method called createCard that generates a DOM node that looks like this. So I might say this dot card equals something like that, and then this one is gonna be this dot name. This one is gonna be this dot image URL. This is gonna be this dot name. Ooh, and this is interesting. The adding the list of abilities, since it's in a separate thing, it's actually a little bit harder, but it's cool. So, oh, one other thing. I want this to be the inner HTML of something, so I'm going to call it div is document.createElement div, and then I'll say div.innerHTML equals, also add that class in there. Class list dot add Pokemon card. Get rid of that. Cool. So I have a div. I add the class to it. I set its inner HTML to this. Now, I also want to bring in these abilities, but that's an array. I got to loop through those. You may not have realized you could do this. I think it's pretty dope. We can, you can actually do like query selector and stuff on any element, not just the entire document. So I might say something like abilities starts as an empty array, and then I do, or no, let's do this. This dot abilities dot map ability. And I return document dot create element li, and then I set li's text content equal to ability, and then I return li's. Now abilities is a list of li's, and I want that abilities UL, which I can get with document dot, or no, sorry, not document, div dot query selector dot abilities, and then do something like, oops, call that UL then. I could do something like for each ability, I want to append it to that UL. So I'll do abilities dot for each ability UL dot append ability, and that should give me that list. And then finally, I can either do something like this dot card equals div, which is probably the more OOP way to do it. I can also return the div, but that works. Dollar signs are a convention that me and the developers of my generation all got beat into using by jQuery. Whenever I put a dollar sign in front of it, it doesn't do anything special, but I'm indicating to myself that I'm talking about an element now, not just some regular JavaScript variable. But that helps me remember that, like, yes, I can query selector that, I can append it to things, I can do all that sort of stuff. All right, so I've created a card. Neat. What else did I need to do? You fetch a list of Pokemon and create new instances for each one of them. Generate cards for each one, and then add them as list items. So I'm going to say, like, append card. I'll probably also make that a method and say list equals document dot query selector dot Pokemon, and then do ul dot append this dot card. And so what I need to do, this dot name equals name, this dot image URL equals image URL, and this dot abilities equals abilities. All right, so my class is in good shape now. So the things I need to do are fetch a list of Pokemon, and then make instances for each, and then generate cards, add them to the DOM. So for fetching all those, maybe I do a static method for all. And it's going to return fetch poke API dot code dot Pokemon V1 no V2. All right, I'm out. Poke API dot code. Oh! Fuck yes! Oh shit! I remember this. This one's a little bit harder because let's see. Suck. All right, check this out. I'm asking you to do it. I'll do it. I'll do it too. So if I just get a list of 20 Pokemon, the problem is that I get a list of links to like the actual stuff. So like I follow that link and I get all of Bulbasaur's shit. All right, so I parse the response. And then oh, good call. Thank you. So I take the Pokemon, or they're actually not Pokemon yet. It's the response. Shut up! It's probably the bike shop. So I take the response, and then I want response.results. And I want to create an array of fetches for each of those. So I'm going to map over those. Each one of those is a Pokemon. And I need to turn them into fetch requests to this URL. So I'm going to return fetch Pokemon dot URL, and then parse the response too. All right, so this is fetches, and what? So that's going to be an array of fetch responses. It's asynchronous though. So use a static method called promise.all, which will execute all of those fetches and return their responses as an array. So then I should have Pokemon. Actually, I'm going to not even need to dot then off of that. Yeah, I think that'll do it. So I do Pokemon.all.then, and that should give me a list of all Pokemon, or 20 of them at least. And then for each one of them, I want to instances are new, no, all Pokemon.map and then return new Pokemon with like Pokemon.name and see its image URL and abilities, and then Pokemon.sprites.front default. I've done this so many fucking times. If you look at these, they have a sprites key somewhere. Sprites. And then front default is like the normal. That's how you get the picture URL. All right, so I take that, and then I need its abilities, which those come as like an array of objects. I just need list items. So their abilities are Pokemon.abilities.map ability, and it's going to be my favorite thing, ability.ability.name. Ability.ability.name, and I'll pass it into the constructor. All right, so that gives me a bunch of instances, and then I can do instances dot for each instance dot generate card instance dot append card, and that should be all of it. And then, all right, it's looking for dot Pokemon. So over to the index in the last lesson. Let's make something in here. Blow it all out. Class Pokemon script source. All right, let's see how I did. Localhost, is it 8080? Nope. What's happening over here? 8081, 3001, something. All right, Pokemon.all.then. Oh, it's because, where am I? Pokemon.all.then. Oh, it should be. Oh, no, that should be fine. Should absolutely be able to do that. Oh, I get it. Need to invoke it. Okay, instance.generate card. I got somewhere. Let's see what. See what instances looks like. All right, I got an array of 20 things. It's got, holy shit, an array of things and an image URL and a name. Getting somewhere. Okay, and then create card, not generate card. That's why. Create card. there you go. 15 minutes. So, yeah, that's the lightning round. You don't have to do it that fast. What questions do you have about like any of the words, the syntax, any of that kind of stuff? And if you want to make me really happy, get rid of that intermediate variable, chain it together. Cool. Oh, and if you like, one last piece of sugar on this. This is what this would look like with async await. You have to wrap it in a function for it to work. You can't just do it all naked out in the open. Put async in front of the function. And then I can do something like all Pokemon equals await Pokemon.all. And now this doesn't have to be in that function anymore. Mm-hmm.
and then returning unstall fetches.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That's fucking crazy is what it is. So this is a promise. So since I'm mapping, I'm returning an array of promises. Promise.all takes an array of promises and resolves all of them and gives you all of their individual results back as an array.
Okay. Or else you get like errors being like, oh, you're parsing the wrong code, you're fetching the wrong thing.
Well, the thing that you would get is you'd have to do them all one after another. I get this one, and then I do all of its stuff, and then I get the next one. So you make 20 different network calls for that, and you have to wait for one to finish before you can do the next one. That sucks. I want to rack them all up and then execute all 20 of those network calls at the same time. Cool. Have a good lunch. Hey, J-Rod.
Man, if I could find the site, copy and paste the other stuff,
Uh-huh.
I was so close to being right there.
Hell yeah, baby. Love it.
But also, getting to that site, how do I get back to that site?
It's I put the link in the channel. It's like hike or something.
Okay. Because
Hike and some
I
letters.
could not go back there.
There it is.
Find it. It's just in our channel.
Yep.
Okay, fine.
Or it's an announce.
Okay, cool. Thanks, bro.
Yep.
Because it's a lot of logistics, as you know.
Yeah, no problem.
So feel free to just send them over my way after they say yes.
All right, we'll do.
Yeah.
Josh, I'm gonna pick up those pizzas about 12:45.
Perfect. It's going on. It's like we're partying for check-ins. We have
Yeah, appreciate it.
The entire district shut down because kids are sick. Seems like, what's the name of the city, like the city that's right there?
Grand Junction.
Is it Grand Junction?
Yeah.
Way west in Colorado. They shut every school because of some illness outbreaks. Just for like, I think they're gonna be all home next week anyways. Then they cut this week. Yeah, it's like crazy.
I think I'm driving through there, I was like,
Yeah, keep your windows up. Turn the inside air off.
look it up. I added that to my algorithm, like, don't email me unless you have restaurant recommendations. Do you? I love it. Really? Yeah, I love it. I'm obsessed with my castle. It's the best. I just had it paid off too. Now, I have a lease on it, but I got free water, so I worked there for a year. Oh, that's for 6 months, and then I got just like last year. That's what Aaron and I have. And now I'm gonna move, and I got like foam mattress. I hate it. Like I want totally worth it. We just make things for like 6 months or whatever.
Took notes.
I have one. We just gotta figure it out. My kids are talking about it, it's best ever.
My computer is a little bit frozen right now, so. So I know the very first thing I wrote down was that I liked your beginning activity because one, it allowed for everybody to be thinking and participating, and you left it open so that they were able to, you know, whatever they wrote. It was good because it just meant that they were thinking about the about fetch. I also liked that you went through each and every one of their descriptions, and then you asked questions to make sure they understood what they wrote, and whatever they needed, you either rephrased even when they got it right. You asked follow-up questions to see if they understood, like I said, and then if they didn't understand, you provided like descriptions and visuals, which I think was really great and very helpful to them. And it also allowed you, like, as you were going through, to revisit any of the more complex topics that they weren't understanding, like when Stacy was going through and like you were clarifying things for them. That was really great. And then getting into the building of the API, that was, I mean, it took a while, but what are you gonna do? You know, people are having errors probably because that Postgres thing, so like, how are you supposed to know? That's the way you've always done it. And you did a good job rolling with those punches, like, okay, do what you need to do. If you don't wanna use Postgres, then don't. If you are going to, figure out the errors. So that was great, and I thought like, in terms of like pacing, I think your pacing would have been good had everyone like been able to make their APIs. I think the only, and like, so that was like a lot of what went well, and then the one, and it's a very small thing, is like, once you're getting to the meat of lesson, I know you're like pressed for time, maybe stop, make sure everyone's API is built so that when you're going through the meat of the lesson, everyone can pay attention and participate versus like trying to catch up.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is hard to do because with Diana not having her computer working in general, with everyone having Postgres.
How, Sophia Martin,
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact terminology on the document.
Yeah.
It's just like being able to explain technical concepts.
No,
clearly.
that's what I was impressed with, because you did that really well at the beginning, and it was great because you had the participation piece, but also you were rephrasing back and clarifying, and so I think you did that really well. Like, you had them thinking about it, you would clarify, then they would explain it again, and then you would clarify some more, or like rephrase, so that was really well done, I felt like, yeah.
Was there anything that you would have added to the lesson?
Added to, no, I
Or, like,
think,
replace something else with?
if, honestly, if the API building had gone, like, it was well scoped, I think. Because you went over sort of like the background theory, wanted them to be able to describe, and then you went to the practical. And I think if you had more time to spend in the practical and then come back around to, okay, so what's your, what is your description of that, or whatever it is, yeah. It was flawless, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
How was I on the chill factor? How did I do?
Good, you're super chill, yeah.
Really good for
I could,
chills,
and it was
wasn't
funny,
it?
cause I saw your nerves, but then once you started talking to them,
Yeah.
you like shifted.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Alright, go get Chris the car.
This Reddit post is called "Hiring Sugar Ray to Break Up with Your Boyfriend During His Thesis."
What?
Mark McGrath from the band Sugar Ray, off the charts, but always in your hearts. And this cameo was booked by Cheyenne, and she wants you to know a few things. And this is a little difficult for me to say because it's the first one of these I've done, but she wants you to know that you mean a lot to her.
Oh,
you mean the world to her. But she's having difficulty staying in this long distance relationship. You know, it's tough. I've been on the road for years, and I've been with my wife a long time, and the biggest arguments, the biggest, obstacles in our relationships is the distance between us. It makes it very difficult when we're on the road, and it's hard. So Cheyenne is trying to let you know, Braden, that it's very, very tough for her to stay in this relationship. She still cares about you a lot. You never know what the future may hold. And she still wants to be friends with you because obviously she cares about you very, very much. And she wants you to know, good luck on your thesis coming up. Probably not the best timing, Cheyenne, when he's doing his thesis, but I understand. You got to work on your thesis and life goes on. And, I'm sure there's big things ahead of you in the future, Braden. But Cheyenne cares about you enough to let you know that she's thinking about you. But the long distance thing is just a little difficult for her. And she wants you to stay positive. She wants you to be friends. And she knows that you're a fan of the band Sugar Ray, which I'm honored. I wish I was delivering you good news. Hopefully I can see you backstage, give you a high five someday, dude, and we can maybe laugh about this sometimes. Hopefully we all can. Cheyenne, Braden, all of us, we all can hang out. But she wants to be friends right now, bro. The long distance thing is a little difficult, but she wishes you nothing but the best. All the love in the world, and do your best on that thesis, man. I know it's tough in the holiday season and relationships and all that stuff, man. But you've got big things ahead of you, bro. If you're working on a thesis, you've got a good life in front of you. All right, on behalf of Mark McGrath and Cheyenne, we love you, Braden. Be positive, bro. All right.
That is like so mean. Cause like it's one thing to get him in after the fact, like to comfort him, but to be your idol and then break up with you.
How does that happen?
Not in person.
How did this come about?
What? How did he even
The only thing that would have made that better is like, me and Cheyenne are gonna be hanging out a little bit.
That is so awful. Who would Cheyenne? What a jerk.
Oh.
What the hell is that? Oh my gosh, I feel so bad for that guy. Your hero breaks up.
Like, how
for
does
your
that happen?
girlfriend.
Do you just pay them a certain amount of
I know,
money?
right? Like, is she very wealthy and she just like.
Oh, what? This was a related video. Mark McGrath flips out on teen who calls him sugar gay.
No.
Make a hole, gentlemen! Make a hole! Move it! Sugar gay. Who said sugar gay? I'm beating your fucking ass. Who said that? Did you? Oh, I'll choke your fucking face. You say that? No, I didn't say anything. You ready to be smart? Did I say anything? Did I say anything? Did you say something? No, I did not say anything. I'll choke your fucking head. Hey, Mark, can I get your autograph, man? Oh, man. Yeah, you can. All right, cool. You beat the fuck out of that guy right there. Yeah. Which one? Tomorrow.
The one that Minnie Driver is gonna do.
I'll choke your fucking face. You see it? Did I say anything?
Yes, you did.
Hold on, he didn't finish his autograph. I want to fucking now. smart ass fucking earthly motherfucker. Like, oh, beat the fuck out of you.
That is absurd. What is our world coming to?
Sure. Okay, so Patrick, what's your last name, if you don't mind just putting it up your application? Okay. Let's take a look. And I heard from your message that you wanted to get started, maybe go to campus today, and one of the email I did reach out to the team there.
Alright, I'll be back.
To drop it, just because, you know, there's costs and things going on, so we do our best to stay confident, but we do have a tour tomorrow, we wanted to RSVP and just want to make a scheduled campus tour. So it's just up to you, I just wanted to kind of share what the options were, so I, okay. Oh, you do?
So I think you're gonna have to.
Oh, okay, cool.
Again, do you want me to resend
Yeah,
you
so I
the
definitely
email?
encourage you for tomorrow, I do not have your application. Do you have the admissions counselor that you're working with? Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Awesome. So it looks like you've already gotten this, okay, so it's fine. You've already read the software. One, that's not okay. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, I'm happy to help you, moving forward, and I do work with our, yeah. So what I recommend doing is, sending us go to the campus tomorrow, and then if you want, we can schedule a call after and kind of talk about next steps. Just since you've already gotten an interview, it sounds like the next steps are like how, you know, preparing for a technical interview. Please send me a call. I haven't been talking about this technical interview Yes, so what you'll actually do, Patrick, is you're gonna be getting, it's about 47 lessons in, there's a lab called the so this is what you'll choose for the actual technical interview, you're gonna present your lab, via Zoom with one of our instructors or coaches, and then you're gonna go through, what you completed, you want to know, we're really just seeing, you know, it's actually a two-way conversation, we just wanna get a sense that you're able to problem solve, work well with an instructor, and then just wanna see how you be as a student in the classroom. So that's what you would need to prepare, I'm happy to send you some information. Do you mind just confirming your email for me, and I'd be happy to send that your way. Can you spell that for me? Yeah, I'll send you that email now.
Let's try to redo it, cause I'm
And
sure
then,
that I can touch base tomorrow.
your campus tour. Is there a time they'll get one document and not the other? Did you do a passport, or were you what? You mean now that you're attending? Okay. Sure. Okay, great, I will give you a call around.
All right, see if you can redo it from that to now, and then if not, ping me and I'll send you a new email.
Okay, great, okay, fine. It's gonna give you the instructions, the lab itself, and you'll, towards, like I said, you're about 32 lessons in, you need to get to 47 before you actually use that lab. But it's under data structures, the lab is called Fidelity. So if you're feeling confident, you can even move forward and try to complete it now, if you feel like you want to complete all the lessons that you have, then you absolutely do that. Yeah, that's kind of lessons between beginning and where that lab is, but like I said, if you're feeling confident, you can definitely move forward. Awesome, absolutely. Great, well, I'm really glad we got to connect. I'm gonna send you that email, and then I will give you a call tomorrow after your tour. Awesome, absolutely, Patrick, have a good day, thank you. Yeah, I've been shopping for years. You know, think about it, and then, you know, other stuff comes up, and I'm like, what do you have for me? I'm like, no. James sent to our student, he's ready to go, he can do a tech interview, like as early as next week, he's already learned something lessons in.
Patrick? Hey.
Yeah, he's already finished an interview, he's originally New York campus, he wants to do Seattle, Zurich, or tomorrow. He's 30 lessons, like 32 lessons in, but I think he could schedule a technical interview hopefully for next week, so fingers crossed, I'm gonna talk to him tomorrow,
I'm on,
but that'd be cool.
yeah, I'm on one of the nationwide
Those are what those are.
Kathy, how are you?
So they're coming in, so I have to do voice
I'm
mails.
doing well. Hold on one second, let me pull up your file.
Today, same thing.
Yeah.
This person like.
Awesome. It's really helpful.
That's what they, the operator all time.
Awesome, so let's see, it looks like you are interested in the UX UI design course, is that right, Kathy?
So I had to request to have it
And are you looking to attend the immersive program or the online?
request to reopen it and transfer it to me and make it this one. So hopefully they'll do that soon, but I can't do it.
Are you currently
Yeah,
in
we're,
Cisco?
that, it's not me where, like, you know.
Yeah, I definitely will.
Okay. And, so my name is Bridget, and my job is to, one, provide you with enough information so that you don't have to go and opt in with each other. And then two, if we both feel like it's a good fit, and also that this is to do the entire admissions process. Okay, yeah. So it looks like you just are kind of starting your research. Have you kind of planned out when you'd like to get started?
Would the pilot be focused mostly around like Slack usage, or like would it be a value for us to pilot this with a program that's already on Canvas so that we can explore the Canvas features that may support with Slack?
Okay, so tell me a little bit about what are you currently doing?
We need to go hire, make happen work.
This will be the first holiday, like, winter holiday.
Yeah, we got to go, we all start in summer. Spring, summer. We can. I like to try going. Get a little cancel. You could look a massive tree.
Yeah, I also like trees.
Go out and do
Another
another
part of doing a campus design.
That's my family's favorite type of movie, so we watch it every year. My sister gets very seriously. Like anything Griswold, like, so I got him that has like his whole speech where he's like cursing, he's like, you like assholes. I got him that for Christmas, and it's like his favorite thing every Christmas XUI will line you up to have both of those things, the security and the
You see like a
creativity.
tracksuit.
I would love that, yeah. It's a good idea. Interesting, so you're almost looking for the creativity and the flexibility as opposed to the security. Cool, that's awesome. And so you said you just started your research. My first question is, what important to know, are you start the research now?
Super small cohorts.
Take that